You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
So, Bob Dylan.
Yes, Bob Dylan has, he's banned the use of telephones, isn't he? Of phones, of people having phones in the audience of his concerts, which is fair enough. When you get to one of his gigs now, your phone is, well, not confiscated, but you have to hand it over, don't you? And put in a bag and you're not allowed to, use it until you pick it up later. And do you know what? I kind of have a lot of, I've got a bit of sympathy with him, actually, for various reasons. I mean, one is, clearly, he's trying to, he's trying to kind of stop very lo-fi, poor quality clips of his set going out and ruining the surprise of some of the songs he's playing, etc. But more importantly, what must it be like when you get on stage and you stare at a forest of iPhones? Which you do, don't you? I mean, you see any clip of anybody, you go look at the Stones in Hyde Park or something, you can't see the Stones for a great mass of people holding phones up. And that must be very dispiriting as a performer, don't you think?
I think he's absolutely right. I can't believe nobody's done it before.
I know,
really.
I know.
Has he actually explained why this is being done? But I'm sure you're right about those reasons. And I think it is mainly the latter rather than the former. It's just, you're performing for a bunch of people who manifestly, half of whom are manifestly not paying attention. They're doing something different. You know, it's as if they were writing down what you were saying or something. Although they wouldn't do that; it could be a lot harder to do.
Well, we had the same experience. Didn't we? We went to Wimbledon. I think we talked about
this.
This
is just what I was going to say. We were in the very best seats on centre court in Wimbledon, watching Nadal in a wonderful game, and there were two women, particularly right in front of you and me, weren't there? In the kind of evening session, who had between them or were working their way through an entire bottle of white wine, which I couldn't help feeling is a little bit of a distraction in itself.
Oh God! And spending the entire time holding up glasses.
I do feel if you go to a major sporting occasion of any kind, okay, I'm going to throw this out there, okay, and a cup final or a test match or whatever. You have a social duty, Mark, not to be pissed.
Absolutely.
Okay? You got to be there. You got to be in the moment. You got to be enjoying it.
Yeah.
If you want to get pissed, go to the pub and get pissed. It's perfectly adequate places you can go and do that.
But
the idea that you should
annoy and distract the people sitting behind you.
No, but even regardless of what you're doing to anybody else, what a pathetic reflection on you as a human being. I can only tolerate this exhibition of athletic prowess at its very highest level if I'm half cut. You know what I mean? And yet,
I need to be half cut to remind myself that I'm enjoying myself. But I think it all stems back to the Instagram, as we were saying the other day. Those girls were spending the entire time, and they were mostly girls actually, holding up glasses of rosé, weren't they? Photographing them with the royal box in the far distance and with Nadal in the front line, or Kyrgios, whoever it was, and they, in order to send to their friends saying, "I've got all this, but at the forefront of the picture, I'm getting absolutely hammered." And you think that is just. Oh.
But also, Mark, what were you also saying when you're doing that kind of thing and you're sending those messages to people? What you're saying is more important to me than watching Nadal or listening to Bob Dylan, more important to me than being with my friends and having a drink, even more important than that is showing off to you that I'm here and you're not. Yeah. It's just pathetic, on every level. And also, moving along from the two women in front of us, wasn't there a guy along who was actually pretty much broadcasting the match live to a mate of his who was in a car somewhere?
Yeah, he was.
Who was following the game on a phone. Yeah. And this is a game that's no doubt available on, 5 Live or whatever if you are minded to follow what was going on.
But you want it from your pissed mate. Love a personal commentary.
Ridiculous,
just to compound our sense of irritation. Oh my goodness me, it was incredible.
I think Bob Dylan is entirely right. I can't believe nobody's done it before. And actually, what we ought to move towards is a kind of discount or some kind of privileged status for people who don't take phones to gigs.
Yeah,
you can only go in the front 10 rows or something if you don't take phones. You can go with the hoi polloi. That'll be absolutely fine up the back, and you can ruin each other's fun. But not in the special sections.
But it must be miserable having no sense of personal reaction with anybody at all because they're just so busy filming you. I mean, that must just drive you absolutely crazy.
So while we're talking about favourite subject, which is the world going to hell in a handcart, and
our speciality subject.
A speciality subject. No, it just struck me. You and I were talking this week about, I'd done an interview with Sheila Fogarty, the broadcaster from LBC, who's done a very good little podcast about her unfortunate, terrible experience of being stalked. And nothing really terrible came of it, but it's a horrible experience for anybody to have. And there's all these stories that Emily Maitlis has had a stalk over 20 years or something like that. Yeah. And there was I happened to see a story in somewhere yesterday that the Beckhams have had a most recent problem of somebody turning up at their daughter's school, claiming that they were supposed to be taking her home from school. I mean, and this is what I thought. Mark. Is it possible that right now anybody taking any notice of this kind of level of appalling antisocial behaviour, it might result in them, we might develop a generation of whom not one in their right minds could possibly think that being famous was in any way desirable.
No, not remotely.
Anymore. Could it just stop? You know what I mean? Because if you're a famous footballer or an actor, it doesn't happen to rock stars because he's not that famous anymore, actually. Although it probably does happen to certain ones. Yeah, actually, it does. Because the profiles of rock stars are a lot lower than they used to be, aren't they?
Yeah.
Whereas the profiles of film stars and TV stars and footballers and so forth, the attention that you draw to, that is drawn to you, is as likely to be malign as benign, isn't it? You know what I mean? It will have all kinds of.
I'm trying to remember who it was at the beginning of lockdown. We talked about, I think it was Robbie Williams, talked about somebody had tweeted saying that they are actually quite enjoying the fact that everyone had to wear a mask because they hadn't been to Sainsbury's for years, and he could go into Sainsbury's with a hat on and a mask, and no one knew who he was. It really brought it home to me how absolutely miserable and how absolutely imprisoned you must be. And that whole thing about being that famous, where if you go out the front door, just to go and buy a pint of milk, whatever, do you still have to? Are you kind of officially on? Do you have to be cautious about what you wear? And it's unspeakable misery.
And I think it's fair to say, I think the overwhelming majority of people are perfectly reasonable and wouldn't dream of indulging in trespassing on anybody's space in any way. But you only need to have a significant minority to make the lives of the famous absolutely miserable. Yeah. And so many of these cases.
And how much easier it is to do it now. You don't have to necessarily physically turn up and stand on somebody's doorstep. You can just constantly barrage them on social media. Everything they say, you can react to in a vicious and
there's this way. Terrible case. People may have read this. Jeremy Vine was giving evidence. In a case this week where somebody formerly worked in local radio, which is the kind of thing that would send a shiver down the spine of anybody who remembers that series of Alan Partridge where, goes into the house where it's covered in
pictures. A shrine. It's a shrine. It's a Alan Partridge. Mentalist. That's where the phrase mentalist came from, didn't it?
And this case involved loads of, weren't necessarily household names, but they were broadcasters on local radio or whatever. Yeah. Jeremy Vine obviously is a household name, and so he was the person who was taking it on, I suppose. But by God, these people have my sympathy. So that's why you and I, Mark, are so right in keeping up our current level of almost total obscurity.
Invisibly low.
The Word Podcast. Prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
Well, we just interviewed Dave Davies of the Kinks for a pod, and he's just got a book out which had some extraordinary revelations. It's called Living on a Thin Line, and and he's I mean, just fascinating stuff. Yeah, very interesting about his legacy, wasn't he? I mean, he's firstly, that's fair enough, and that's not a great surprise that he thinks that the Who, Hendrix, and the Doors, etc., were influenced by the Kinks' early sound, and that the Clash and the Enduring Madness and Blur by the later slightly kind of music hall stuff. And and he's absolutely right, I think, to feel aggrieved that the Kinks aren't quite accorded that kind of level of respect. Probably because they kind of fizzled out slightly as a live act towards the end and never kept themselves in the frame. There's a lot of stuff in the book, isn't there, about the fact that they were let down by their managers when they were touring America, and they were completely unprotected. Larry Page was off kind of producing orchestral versions of their tunes, and I think signing Sonny and Cher rather than being with them and holding their hands every time they played gigs, and so they were having to argue all about the money and settle all the disputes themselves, and they kind of engineered a very kind of grumpy kind of signature, didn't they? Where people just thought we just can't deal with this group, and they were blacklisted, weren't they? Blacklisted eventually from the American tour circuit, And there's a lovely little bit about when Ray, I think, is just suffering from general ill health and exhaustion. And they do a 2-week tour, a European tour, with a Ray Davies stand-in. Remember that bit? And nobody notices. And that's fantastic, isn't it? And lovely stuff, I thought, about the whole concept of kinkiness, which is a kind of uniquely mid-60s British, indeed.
Because he said that he always felt that he didn't like the name the Kinks.
No.
Which is kind of ironic, because it's probably one of the key defining characteristics of the Kinks.
It is.
He always thought a better name was the Ramrods.
The Ramrods, that was his first group, the Ramrods.
We wouldn't, but we were talking about them now.
No, the Kinks was a great name.
Think about the Kinks, and also just to remind people who aren't as elderly as you and I, is that kinky and the whole kinky was a whole world in the 60s. You know what I mean? It ranged from kind of boots, it was fashion stuff. It was skirts, it was boots, It was caps also.
Hunting boots, jumpers.
But also it was kinky behaviour in the sense of all that stuff that we would now rather pompously describe as transgressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
In one way or another. In those days, was just given the kind of the umbrella term kinky. It was, that's kinky. And one of the surprising facets to me of the book is that he writes very honestly about the fact that we were very correct if we were, if people at home watching the Kinks doing Well-Respected Man or Dedicated Follower of Fashion or him doing Death of a Clown, came to the conclusion that there was more. He was more polysexual than we might, on the face of it, appeared. They were absolutely right in this,
completely. No, he's very, very keen to point out how energetically. What's the word? He was kind of equal opportunities man, wasn't he? Well, he has a major affair with Long John Baldry at one point.
But it's more. Listen, David Bowie comes out in 1971 or whatever and says, I'm bisexual. Dave Davies had good reason to say, that's old news,
very old news.
I've been doing that for years.
I know, absolutely. And when we asked him about it, he said, presumably that's something that your press officer was going to keep quiet. He said, well, it was illegal at the time, which you forget, actually.
He was a very good point. It was illegal.
You kind of think, why wasn't he more open about it? But anyway, he was open about it on a local level,
Yeah,
no, so incredible.
Here he is just talking about it.
You have, there's a bit where I think you have a love affair with Long John Baldry and things like that. I mean, those kind of things weren't things you talked about in interviews at the time, were they?
No, it was because homosexuality was illegal till 1966.
Yeah.
And in showbiz or the theatre or the arts or those allied parallel businesses, there was a lot of homosexuality or experimentation, rather than and it was quite an eye opener when I realised that a lot of people experimented in the arts. And it wasn't what they called everyday life, attitudes and,
Yeah.
and sexuality and art. It's all about finding out, searching. That's the whole purpose of art is finding out, trying out, experimentation.
This is a junction in the Word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
That's Dave Davies talking to us about his book, Living on a Thin Line, which is out now. Mark!
Well, I was going to mention Word magazine because it was 10 years ago, pretty much to the day, wasn't it, that Word magazine closed? And I was going to say to you, and I'm sure you probably feel the same, actually, how what mixed feelings I have, because I mean, obviously, it's a great sense of sorrow and regret, but there's also an enormous sense of relief, actually. And
Huge.
it was a noble cause. When people say something's a noble cause, you kind of think, oh, that's an uphill struggle. Well, I can remember when it closed, Andrew Harrison, I don't know if it was a public thing or he just sent it to me as an email, I can't remember, but I've kept it anyway. And Andrew Harrison had this brilliant thing. Andrew Harrison was the kind of features head, one of the main creative engines of the magazine. And he said, Word was like being asked to join the Magnificent Seven. He said there were bad times, and these were bad times, and the village needed people to defend its values, beliefs, and principles. A few old gunmen had come out of retirement for one last job, and in our hearts we knew we were headed for a chest full of lead. But people would write songs about us, and the most beautiful girl in the village would wear black for the rest of her life. If the Word died, it would die with its boots on. I thought that was really good, actually, because it reminded me of what kind of harmony. You were constantly kind of stopping holes in dams and constantly fighting the tide and constantly trying to kind of keep the whole thing going. I mean, virtually all magazines, have their era. There's an era they define. It's Smash Hits or Let It Rock or The Face or Q or whatever. And Word was a kind of snapshot, wasn't it, of 2002 to 2012, And I was very proud of the fact that it was like a little club and that it never made you feel bad for liking something or never made you feel unfashionable or awkward or outmoded or whatever. And it tended to cover things it enthused about and forgot about the rest. And I think the fact it was way ahead on things like, about long-form telly and writing about songwriters and not bands, people that you could grow old with, people who got better as they got older. Which there aren't that many. Tom Waits, Lucinda Williams, John Prine, Leonard Cohen, Nick Cave, Nick Lowe. It wrote about film directors, not actors, mostly. It wrote about authors, not books. And it was very, very hot on the whole iPod boom, people's appetite for just new tracks, But I miss the people. I don't know how much I miss the magazine. I miss the people. But it was a Dunkirk spirit, wasn't it? I felt very responsible for the sales a lot of the time. You were kind of like the little corner shop in the shadow of the giant mega stores. You had the long shadows of Q and Mojo, and you had to kind of just keep the boat afloat. And I can remember the big triumphs. I can remember. Do you remember the John Peel cover? That was fantastic. John Peel cover pinned up in newsagents. And, the various others, the Roger Waters, the Amy Winehouse, the Joni Mitchell. But one thing I really felt about it was that I miss having made a physical product. I miss the feeling of when it's done and you've got something that you've created, the physical thing, you can leaf through it. What I don't miss was actually working on a physical product because it was so labour intensive. Don't you think, looking back on it now, seems to be less and less appetite for physical products. And just the proofs, the spelling, the artwork, everything. And particularly the age of podcasts, you record a podcast, you put it up. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that physical labour of handcrafted physical objects, I don't miss that.
When I posted a couple of weeks ago when it was there, I don't know when's the actual anniversary of when it closed and when the announcement went out. I posted something on Twitter about it. And, loads of people responded. People are very nice and very kind, and so forth. But a few people say, can't you get back together again just to do one issue? I felt like I wish I had the home address of these people so I could go around and tell them just how utterly impossible that would be. You know what I mean?
Absolute agony.
Because it's just, it's hard enough to do something regularly. When you're going uphill, and don't forget, the whole market was an uphill struggle. It didn't matter whether you were Q, Mojo, or The Word, or anybody. They're all suffering exactly the same things, which is there was no growth and there was no advertising, and things were just going backwards. And you were trying to do a thing that fewer and fewer people had an appetite for. But the idea that you could ever get those people together to do that just once.
It's the Magnificent Men thing. It's the Magnificent Seven.
But I said, and I wasn't being kind of flip. I said, if you can find, 2,000 people who would pay £100 each.
And pay in advance.
Well, that's the point, yes.
Yeah.
And that is just utterly impossible. The only thing I'd say about
but it was meant
about Word.
That's the sweet
the
thing.
point
People
about
just
Word. Okay, and that's fine. But this is Word, every bit as much as that was Word.
It is.
This is it.
Not the same tone. The same kind of editorial.
We don't have to do the things you used to have to do. I mean, can you, if you've never done it, it's impossible to get through to people just how much dog work, leg work, labour, bureaucracy, politicking, glue sticking, travel, expenses filing, bureaucracy was involved in even an 800-word piece in a print magazine that was done to any kind of standard. You cannot believe how much work there was in those things.
But the beautiful
like
thing is
feature film level of work, levels of work involved in those kind of things. And you do them, and it would come out, and you'd sell a few copies, and then it's just gone.
But the beautiful thing is they did exist. It exists, and people still have them. But I mean, my God, looking back at it now, it does seem it's a tough old gig, wasn't it?
Well, it's like anything, Mark. It's I'm sure you could apply this to anything, to pop music, to sport, to anything. If it's all going well, it's the easiest job in the world.
That's it.
If it's not going well, if it's not going well, it's the hardest job in the world.
I really
overnight
because you're doing more work for less acclaim, aren't you?
Yes,
and you just can't see that. When we were on Smash Hits in the early 80s, what a dream that was, because it was really hard work, but all the time you had this following wind. And every issue seemed to sell more than the last one. And you used to somehow, completely wrongly, think that it sold more because somehow you had produced a more fantastic magazine. That's simply not true. There were just a load of people in the market for it who'd never heard of it, and suddenly they saw Howard Jones on the cover. I said, I like him, I'll buy it. Not necessarily to do with you at all.
No. So, it's 10 years since the Word closed. We great fondness for it, and great fondness for all the people who were fond of it and are still fond of the idea. But would we go back to cranking out a monthly magazine? There isn't the money in the world that would persuade me to do it. I don't know about you, Mark, but there is not the money in the world.
The Word Podcast, 2 cocoa tins and a piece of string.
Did you see the story about the Eagles? And
I did.
These three chaps are in court in the United States over allegedly, stealing a whole load of kind of original lyrics and notes and so forth about the Eagles Hotel California.
I didn't see that story.
And offering them for sale. And Don Henley, who has, a memory that a Serbian would doff his hat to, Don Henley does. Dr. Ian, the late Ian Paisley would have recognised one of his own in Don Henley. He does not forget at all, and of course he is the sole heir, really, isn't he, of the original Eagles? I suppose Joe Walsh and so forth.
So what was stolen? This was.
There's basically somehow, and the missing bit of the story is a load of material related to Hotel California, paper, handwritten stuff, notes. I don't know, maybe studio notes, maybe tries at lyrics and all that kind of stuff, was given or somehow found its way into the hands of somebody who was writing a biography of the Eagles. And this is, I think, back in it's quite a few years ago. This is a few decades ago. And then was presumed to have disappeared. This has somehow found its way in onto the kind of the same market, albeit on a smaller scale, that stolen works of art probably turn up in oligarchs.
I'm sure it is.
In oligarchs' cowsheds.
How are they rumbled trying to sell this?
Well, one of them is a curator of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, this is bad.
Yeah,
this is bad.
It's the idea that it's got to court. And the thing that, go and have a look on the New York Times website or whatever, because when I saw a picture of these three guys in court at the early kind of hearings, the Americans have a big thing about kind of public disgrace. And they always put people through what they call the perp walk, don't they? That the key thing about being arrested is you should be seen to be arrested. Yeah. You should be seen going in and out of a courtroom or whatever. These three guys were in court, and they were handcuffed behind their backs, which I thought, for guys who've allegedly half-inch lyrics from Hotel California is a little bit heavy-handed.
Yeah. Just in case there hadn't been anybody else in the courtroom who had a kind of original manuscript of a Leonard Cohen lyric, don't think that's going to be safe.
You can't imagine what kind of trouble you'd get in if you'd organised an insurrection against the American Constitution. You'd be in a terrible state if that's what happens to you when you walk off with, a copy of Pretty Maids All in a Row from Hotel California. Anyway, that's what's going on in the United States, honestly. It's a crazy town, crazy people.
Crazy people.
So keep an eye on that one. Also in legal news, I was interested to see that there was a court case. There's always a court case every week. Of some erstwhile members of a group arguing about who owns the legacy, who's got the rights to trade on the name. Is it going to be Led Zeppelin? Is it going to be the Moody Blues? Is it going to be Van Halen? Is it going to be the Sex Pistols? Is it going to be the Clash? Is it going to be the Human League? Or is it the Rubettes?
It's the Rubettes. I love that because
the Rubettes.
The Rubettes. The idea that there was a group, 49 years ago, in kind of fiercely creased white flared trousers with giant lapels and absurd collars and feather-cut haircuts. And an entire soap opera could be written about the backstabbing, deceit, attrition, chicanery, skullduggery involved in this group, the Rubettes. Reminds you that actually every single group, doesn't matter what group they are and what level they're operating on, has a completely unique story, doesn't it? Because in this case, the story is, I think, is Alan Williams the singer, right?
Something like that.
And Alan Williams did not write Sugar Baby Love, which is what the whole issue's about, because it's still quite a big hit and makes a lot of money. Didn't write it. Was the manager of the group. Was accused by the others of being kind of heavy-handed and very secretive about the cash the band received, etc., wasn't he? And the others were involved in a clandestine and secret plan to split from him. And it's all, it's just, you have no idea who's right, who's wrong, whatever. And it's the Rubettes, for Christ's sake.
It would be really good to have a Friday night BBC 4 serious documentary that pretended it was the Clash, but actually it was about the Rubettes.
Yeah.
The great truth is all groups are the same.
All groups are the same.
Completely the same.
Completely.
And, well, we were talking to Graham Goldman, weren't we, about this, when he, at our Word in the Park thing the other week. And Graham goes out and performs as 10cc.
Well, he used to go out as Graham Gouldman's 10cc, but he said he went out on this tour and he just thought, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to call it 10cc and see what happens. And everyone's gone very quiet. So that's fine. And quite rightly, because, for God's sake, if he wants to do it, let him do it. The only reason they're not involved with it is they don't want to do it themselves. He's got every right.
No,
also, he's a founder of the group and writer of most of the songs. Whereas
absolutely.
This guy's just happens to be the singer of a band most of whose material was written by other people. It's amazing.
It's amazing. So I was
Manny
amazed.
Charlton. We should mention Manny Charlton.
Manny Charlton.
Manny Charlton, who I interviewed in 1978.
Out of Nazareth, this is, of course, the guitarist out of Nazareth.
Yeah, he was the guitar player. Yeah, Dan McCafferty was the singer? That's right.
Was the singer, yes.
Yeah. No, he died, and I can remember being sent up by the NME in 1978 to interview Nazareth. I was desperate to do Crispy Ambulance or a certain ratio or the Teardrop Explosion. But no, I was very much at the bottom of the food chain. It's Funkapolitan, it's all happening in New Zealand. So I sent up on a private aircraft to the Isle of Man, and I've told you this before. It was so brilliant. It was just
sorry. Hold on. I've never heard private aircraft before. Tell me, what was the private aircraft? From where?
It was from, where did we go from? London. We went from London with the management of the group. Who else was on the plane? I can't remember. Photographer, me. Very small plane, straight to the Isle of Man.
So not a scheduled flight.
No, it was in a private aircraft. And I can remember, that's the amount of money Nazareth must be making at the time. And the fact that living on the Isle of Man was the fact they were tax exiles. And as I told you before, it was like Stella Street, because in the same road, there were members of Status Quo coming out to get their milk bottles, just looking down the street, there were these hairy old guys. And what struck me about Manny Charlton as interesting was he was mortified by punk rock. Really, really miserable about it. The rug had been comprehensively pulled from under his feet. His entire career appeared to be over, which I suppose in a sense with Nazareth it was. And he was just he just felt redundant and miserable and couldn't help complaining about it. But no, I thought he was an interesting guy, because the interesting fact was that Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose, etc., loved Nazareth, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they loved a particular track. It was The Hair of the Dog, I think. And if you listen to Hair of the Dog,
wasn't it?
Dan McCafferty was that. I think it's a track on the album. And Dan McCafferty sounds exactly like Axl Rose. And so they said, let's get the guy who produced this in.
Really? Yeah.
And they got him in. Actually, he did produce 25 tracks, I think, Manny Charlton, but he just didn't have the time to finish the whole project, and somebody else brought in the end. But he was the basic. He did the basic groundwork for the sound of Guns N' Roses. So the Nazareth legacy, Dave, lives on.
Can I just remind ourselves here of how strange it was? Nazareth's big hits were, Mark Ellen, over to you. Do you know what they were?
Go on, I don't think I can.
There were, they did a version of Love Hurts, didn't they? The old ballad.
Yeah,
it's kind of Everly Brothers song, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love hurts, love scars, it wounds and mars.
Yeah.
All that thing. And the other thing, even more surprising, because when I was just refreshing my memory about this morning, I thought, did that really happen? Yes, it did. Nazareth's big hit was their version of Joni Mitchell's This Flight Tonight.
My God, yes.
What, you remember?
Yeah. What a bizarre choice for a kind of gritty Scottish hard rock band.
And they did a kick-ass version of Joni Mitchell's, none more kind of introspective. This Flight Tonight.
Also, they are another indication of the enormous influence of the band, aren't they? The band,
yes.
the group that split up Cream when they heard this. No point carrying on. The group that, without whom Fairport Convention would never have become the Fairport Convention that they did, because they want to be kind of an English version.
They want to be the band. Yeah, that's right.
But also Nazareth, who called themselves Nazareth after the character in the lyric, the band lyric, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Word Podcast. Fix yourself a drink and it's like being in the pub.
welcome to a little birthday special. The very first person we had actually doing a birthday special podcast, whatever it was, 2 years ago, I think, Alan Williams. Alan, lovely to see you again, and happy birthday. And you've been, I think, continuing your energetic hunt for hypnosis album sleeves.
Yeah, well, I think we spoke about this last year, and you asked me if I was trying to collect them all, and I was a bit evasive. But I think I realised this year I am trying to collect them all.
Oh, he's coming out.
Right. Yeah. And so, okay, so how many are there, and how many have you got?
Well, I think that I've got a book that they published which lists all the actual hypnosis ones. There's about 370, perhaps, of them.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
But then there's all the things that Storm Thorgerson went on to do.
Yeah.
So, there's perhaps 500 or something. And
Can we ask how many you've got?
Probably about 150, something like that.
That's fantastic.
Oh, it's a long way to go, but it's a decent start. It's a decent start.
Yeah.
So, what have you acquired most recently?
Well, I've really enjoyed sort of since lockdown ended, being able to go out and about shopping a lot. And most weekends we've managed to sort of stumble on second-hand record shops or charity shops. So,
right. So you're not buying these online. You're actually going into shops and just hoping there'll be
I buy a few online.
Ainsley Dunbar's Retaliation record.
Only going to shops. I mean, for a birthday treat last Sunday, we went up to Chesterfield where there was a record fair actually on Chesterfield Market, an open air one. It was really lovely.
So this is your birthday treat, an open air record fair at Chesterfield.
Yeah, quite a good hall up there. So, but I've got a few interesting things this year. I mean, this was one I got in London.
Oh my God, Free Creek.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't know anything about this, but it seems to be a set of sessions. It's got all sorts of people. Yes. Keith Emerson, Mitch Mitchell, I think Eric Clapton's on there, Linda Ronstadt, Todd Rundgren.
God, I have not seen that record for 40 years.
Hold up the sleeve again. Let's have another look.
Yeah, it's a gatefold as well. So.
It's called Music from Free Creek, it was called, wasn't
amazing.
it? Something that kind.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think what it was kind of sessions where these people came together, but they weren't really official things that their record companies had approved. And
no.
I read
it's somebody got hold of a load of tapes and thought, I'm going to put this out. That's good. So what else you got?
Good find. I got Halloween.
Oh my God! I've never seen that.
Heard of that.
Ones.
Yeah,
wow. Quite like that because where are we? Just there. I'm pretty sure that is actually Storm Thorgerson. It looks rather like
that's
him.
such a hypnosis image, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's so Pink Floyd.
Yeah. There. So that was a good find. I thought that was a good one.
Oh God!
The rainbow.
Yes. Snapping on the gloves. Oh,
yeah. Then there was a good book came out this year. Aubrey Powell did a new book telling some of the stories behind.
Right, has that come out? Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a nice sort of Dark Side of the Moon themed thing, but it's got quite a lot of detailed stories about the sort of lavish photo shoots they went on, and he talks at great length about this one.
No, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Which cost a fortune, didn't it?
Yeah, this was a statue that McCartney owned, and he said to Aubrey Powell, we want to take a picture of that. So it was either the Matterhorn or the Eiger.
Yeah.
But they couldn't actually get there. But basically, they chartered helicopters and flew this thing out at great expense. And then I think when they got it back and showed McCartney, he said, oh, you could have just done that in the studio.
And that was
your bill.
And that's the turning point, isn't it? Because that's the amazing thing about hypnosis stuff, particularly the early stuff, is they did it. They actually did it. If you want a load of balls in the North African desert for the nice album Elegy, I think it was, wasn't it?
That's it.
You took a load of balls out to the North African desert and you inflated them and you photographed them.
The idea now that you would have to inflate a giant pig and physically fly it over the Battersea Power Station seems absolutely absurd, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Although even that one, they had to do it in more than one day because the sky wasn't right or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was comped together.
Yeah.
from 2 sessions. So that was the kind of beginning of the age of fakery we live in now. So those are ones you've acquired. What's your kind of holy grail of hypnosis album covers? What's the one you really want? Might be somebody out there who's got one.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple by a group called Flash that are quite.
Oh right, of course. Steve Pete Banks out of Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Was it? Well done, though. That's very good.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
There's a few of the Pink Floyd ones I need. I mean, you find those quite often, but they tend to be a little bit overpriced because it's Pink Floyd. So I just, if I see a good bargain one, I will. But it's some of the more obscure ones are quite interesting. One thing I know you're always interested in how people itemize or store their records.
Oh right, go on.
Well, I took the radical decision. I thought I'm going to have a separate hypnosis section. So to about out there along, that's all the hypnosis. And
so how many yards
that's
of hypnosis?
Very advanced. That is.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So it's easier to find them.
Yeah.
This was one I'd been looking out for, and I found in Manchester a few.
Oh, well, of course.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a compilation. It's got various people. It's got a bit of Kevin Ayres and there's a bit of Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
I just think that's sort of typical of their photo style, really.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think it's from very early 70s. But and there's a kid on the back staring at a dead crow or something.
There you go.
So there commercial. So uplifting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, keep your quest going, Alan, and we should no doubt come back next year to see if you
see the next yard.
See if you've gone further up. Yes.
Yeah. You're listening to the Word Podcast, where the time is whenever you want it to be.
So, Alex, it's a red letter day on Planet Indie, isn't it? You've all got the bunting out and the hats on the side of your head. Small children are running about.
Bucket hats on the side of our head.
Why are you celebrating, Alex? Why is the word Le Tout Planet Indie en fête? Why is it? Why?
Well, it's Nolmus. Because it's the 25th anniversary of seminal Oasis record "Be Here Now," which
there you go.
is approximately 4 days of unbridled ear-destroying joy.
So are people swinging around lampposts, clicking their heels, and stranger kissing stranger, that kind of thing?
Well, actually, there's a lot of "Be Here Now" is a big question mark, as you probably know very well, because it is. You can't. You start listening to it and you finish listening to it. You've grown several beards in that space of time. And, you touch. You just listen to half a song and you get high. I mean, that's the level of chemical overindulgence that was involved in the making of that record.
But also the general consensus is it was dismal rubbish, wasn't it?
Well,
isn't that the general feeling? Do you know what I mean? Stand by Me. All around the world. This is not the first album, Magic.
Well, I suppose lead single was, do you know what I mean, wasn't it? And that's 7 minutes long. And the first minute of that, bear in mind this is the lead single of the track, the first minute of this song is helicopter noise and Morse code for a minute. And the chorus doesn't come in for about 3 minutes, I don't think.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's just a complete kind of, it's outlandish to say the least. But I think that Be Here Now is going to go undergo a bit of a revision,
Oh, right. Okay.
God, well,
fighting talk.
Good luck with that.
Well, it's kind of a marker point of a particular era, isn't it? And, at that point, there was only one way for Oasis to go, and that was bigger and more overblown and more overindulged. And it delivered on all those points. And the problem,
in a good way.
There's some absolute gold in there. I think there's a track. The track 2 on the record is a track called My Big Mouth, and it's fantastic. It just sounds like you're being thrown through a wind tunnel. It's just so dynamic. It's brilliant. It's got one of Liam's best vocals, I think. But the whole record is swimming in 18 layers of guitars. The tracks are too long. It wasn't edited. There's no real bass frequency on the record. I think what Owen Morris, who's the producer, did, he mixed it having taken out a lot of the low, and so it's very mid-rangey. And for those who kind of aren't really au fait with studio-y kind of terms, it sounds a little bit dirgy because of that. There's no kind of differentiation between. There's no clarity there. But there was some really, really great stuff involved in all that. And I think, at the time, the hype didn't help because it could never, ever, 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 ever live up to all the hype it was being given. It's basically being held as humanity's greatest gift since our inception as a species.
By everybody? Or?
Can I put my hand up at this point? Because I didn't, but a lot of people did.
But that's how it was being sold, wasn't it?
Well, the interesting thing about the Oasis to me in that whole era was that the country was kind of drunk on itself. That's my memory of it at the time. They're the biggest band in the world. No, they weren't. You know what I mean? They were the biggest band in the UK, undoubtedly. But Britain was very kind of high on itself at the time, in lots and lots of respects, and they were kind of classic side of that. So, okay, well, you've mounted your passionate defence, and we shall see whether there is a massive reinvestigation of this 25 years on. Talking of the passage of time and Planet Indie, Alex, you posted me the other day, you're concerned that Dave Grohl, a man about whom you will not have anything said that is in any way negative, had reached a particular milestone in his life. Go on, explain this.
Okay, well, Dave Grohl has now officially hit the Meldrew Point. Now, the Meldrew Point is is when you are the exact age that Richard Wilson was when he first started playing Victor Meldrew, which is 19,537 days old, which in layman's terms is 53 and a bit. But Dave Grohl has passed that point now, and it's I still won't hear a negative thing said about him.
That's misleading because he was playing a much, much older man, wasn't he? But it's amazing he's 53.
But it's interesting.
Like
okay,
so
there you go. So Clive Dunn was how old when he first played Corporal Jones in Dad's Army?
Probably 38 or something. I don't know.
40. He was 48. He was pretty much the youngest of the main cohort of Dad's Army cast, apart from being Lavender and so forth. So Dave Grohl is now 53, which means that he's now 1 year too old to play Paul McCartney's grandfather in Hard Day's Night. Because when Wilfred Brambell appeared in Hard Day's Night as Paul's grandfather, who was the epitome of everything elderly, and I fought in the war for the likes of you and all that.
Missing teeth, probably.
He was 52 years old now, admittedly a character actor, and he'd always played older. But he's still, if you want to do a kind of picture of a disapproving grandfather figure, Wilfred Brambell in Hard Day's Night.
So
in the railway
younger than
carriage,
Richard Wilson. That's fantastic.
Does the job. He's younger than Richard Wilson.
Oh, that's so great.
And younger than Dave Grohl is to this day.
Also 53, Marilyn Manson. They're not getting any younger. Nicky Wire, James Dean Bradfield. I think I've just become Graham Coxon. It's happening. I mean, a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, the alternative is not attractive, is it? Really? So get older. Everybody, all the cool kids are doing it. Getting older. So, what have we been doing recently? Have we got new patrons, Alex? Anything we ought to tell people about?
We do. We've got some new people to welcome to the fold, and they are.
Yes, let's do that.
Sid D.
Hello, Sid. Very nice to hear you.
Nick Gould.
Nick Gould,
Hello,
come on
Nick. Come on down.
The fantastically named Lance Rifle.
Oh, that's
Lance, right? That's excellent.
That can't be real. That's
Is that real? That's a regiment.
I like to think it's real.
That's a really good name.
We want to know if it's real.
Parents with
and the wonderfully monosyllabic Pam.
Pam, good. Well, good for Pam.
You're all very, very welcome. And if anybody would like to join this this host of right-thinking, right-acting individual, the place to do it is patreon.com/wordinyour-ear, and you can find out where you'd like to come in on that particular relationship ladder, shall we call it that?
Ooh, that's
what
good.
else have we've been doing recently? We did a fantastic Word of Your Ear the other day with Bruce Findlay.
Oh, he was so
Who's
good.
Bruce Findlay? People say. I'm saying Bruce is a figure unique in British music business history.
He is. He is, because he's the
But he is
person most closely associated with the name of a record shop. Isn't it? Bruce's Records from Edinburgh.
Bruce's
And of the
Records.
many branches all over Scotland, in fact.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to think. There was Andy's in Cambridge, wasn't there? There was Andy's in Cambridge. And presumably there was an Andy. But Bruce always had a bit of a profile because he went on and he managed Simple Minds and did loads of things like that.
God,
But
it was
listen,
interesting. That
he
was
was
so interesting. Just the
fantastic.
little details. One detail was saying that record companies used to put out their albums to coincide with the first week of the college grant because
Yep.
people had more money. It was great. They also used, in the shops, you had a little rack called Bruce's Nice Sounds, where you'd have Miles Davis and the Incredible String Band and all sorts of variety.
So he talks about the extraordinary stories about the golden days of the LP trade. He talks about the weekend when he went out on a limb and ordered 500 copies of the first album by an unknown group, and I'm not going to tell you who the group is.
And he sold them all.
And by the time he was halfway through Saturday,
Yeah.
he'd rung up to get more. And if you want to know who the group was, and loads of other stories like that, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you haven't already done that, make sure you do that, because that'll be coming up very soon, along with other unmissable stuff.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.